paranormal. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, boys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted, but we're not going to be talking ghosts tonight, or at least not much, because this is an honor. I'm really shocked these gentlemen were willing to come on the show here. I'm dealing tonight with a couple of guys out of Australia named Stephen and Evan Strong. They've spent years living with tribes of people in Australia, researching their oral histories of ancient aliens and their involvement with Earth people. And they got several books out. I know they've been on a couple of TV shows up here, but Interview with an Alien, we're going to be discussing that tonight, Forgotten Origin, and a book called Between a Rock and a Hard Place, among others. So rather than sit and listen to me, let's bring up the guests, Stephen and Evan Strong.
Good morning or afternoon, Dan. Hi, how are you?
Fine,
Hi.
guys. How you doing?
Good.
Man, I could not believe when you guys were willing to come on the show here, because generally I do ghosts. I do get into UFOs and aliens on occasion, but the stuff you're doing is like cutting edge. This thing is far beyond what most people are doing. So why don't you explain to us what you think about our Forgotten Origin?
Well, it's an interesting story because we've done our archaeology somewhat differently than others. We don't walk onto anyone's property until the elders ask us to come onto property, and then we do this old way. We observe protocol, we talk to the elders, and the elders tell us what the answer is, and we don't question that. We then make up questions to go with the answer we've been given. So we go about this the opposite way to most archaeologists who get a funding, work out the answer, then walk onto country and tell the original people, this is what I think is going on.
Well, you even tried to have a clipboard and it's been thrown away.
Oh,
Yeah.
And they're quite aerodynamic when you throw them too.
And the reason we got into this is because way back at the very beginning, maybe 15 years ago, we had some elders from the Ramangeri Nation. They're about 3,000 kilometers from where we live, that asked me to come down and do ceremony with them. And in return, they would tell me all the old secrets of what used to happen in this country. And I said to them at the time, okay, I'll come down. What time should I book a flight back? And the answer was, when you leave. I spent about 10 days down there, and I was starting to think, am I living here now? Before one day, what Evan said was true. I was standing there with my clipboard recording information. Kano came up to me, picked up the clipboard and threw it off into the distance and said, you won't need that anymore. And that was the beginning of my ceremony. And from that point on, what that did, it gave us the right, basically, because Kano was probably the most respected elder in Australia at the time before he passed on. It gave us the right to walk onto countries that nobody had been before and see things that they kept secret. So that's how this has begun, because we've done this differently. We've gone to the Indigenous people and said, you teach us how to do this and we'll follow your instructions. And as a result of that, for the last 15 years, we've gone all over this country finding stuff, information, mysticism, aliens, lots of yowies. All this stuff has become part of our daily life and our daily bread.
We'll bring you back to ghosts as well, where even though that he's passed, we've had plenty of contact from that elder since he passed.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he's still with us in that sense.
He still passes on information and things we've got to do. In fact, he's directed me quite a few times. He's appeared to us. His totem is an eagle. He's appeared to us in the form of an eagle. I remember one morning when I opened the bedroom doors, the windows there sitting on the gutter with his head looking towards me as a wedge-tailed eagle. and it just stared at me, and it gave me a message. And that became part of what we did from that point on. So, yeah, we're involved in this in every possible way.
Wow. Guys, let me, and I hope I'm not insulting anyone. I certainly don't want to do that. But when you talk about the elders, are these the Aborigines, or is this another group of people down there?
No, we actually call ourselves now, I'm Original too, we call ourselves Original rather than Aboriginal, because the word ab is a negative prefix, and the original people believe they are the first people on the planet. Therefore, they call themselves the original people. Now, the elders are those that have learned culture and law to the stage where they're respected, not because they got a degree, not because they have a lot of money, because they know the old ways. So an elder is someone who is conversant in the old culture and hasn't lost it.
To give you an example, one of the ceremonies, one of our elders, Auntie Bev, had to dance for 3 days straight, and she wasn't able to stop.
Yeah, that particular ceremony she did for the women, she went into the middle, and she was allowed to have a 10-minute break every 6 hours, right?
Yep.
Wow.
And she had to dance for 3 days straight. There were 3 people watching it. At any stage, if she stopped dancing, she's not an elder. So you have to work for your ceremonies here. It's not something where you sit in a big hall and pick up a pen and then get 92 out of 100 and you've passed. It's a lot different here.
It's incredible. And again, no insult intended, but how do the people, the originals, live now? Are they living in townhouses and such, or are they still living in the old ways?
The word abject poverty comes to mind when we talk about original people.
Okay.
They live in abject poverty mainly. I'm talking about 99%.
I'd say that especially in the outback.
Oh, yeah.
Some would be living in third world.
Actually,
conditions.
we're in contact. We're doing an online conference this weekend with an elder from that area. And I remember Binner, who's working with us on that, he said, you know how there's third world poverty? I said, yeah. He said, this is fourth world.
Oh, what a shame.
But they are, look, the elder we're talking to doesn't have a house, and he's the big keeper of Old Way. I think he's got an old caravan that's parked on someone else's land, and they can't even drive to do ceremony because they don't have the money. So we are talking people that are really doing it tough. So, yeah, some people are living semi-traditionally, but that's because of the fact that they don't have a choice. Not quite the same.
But do you think that's why they're still in touch with their roots and their old ways?
Absolutely, mate. You've got that right in one, Dan, because this is the point. In original society, the one thing they can't wallow over is money. They don't have any. So what that means is that if you don't have all the trappings and, let's say, tricks of our society that suck us into different areas where we can't get out, this mob here, the people we're talking to this weekend, they have nothing. They have a car because they've got to get around, and that's the sum total of it. But what it does to an extent. Not all original people are that way inclined, but I'd say half are, simply because they're so damn poor. They can't get tricked into anything because there's nothing to trick with. There's no incentive. So, yeah, you're right about that.
But as for living a fully traditional lifestyle, there are rumours. There's rumours that there's a mob out in the desert that appear from time to time to kind of they'll appear out of nowhere and then probably get up everyone else, pull your head in.
There was a time once, I'll tell you of a time once, this is about 5 or 6 years ago in the middle of Australia, when all the original people were in a big hall fighting with each other. We do that a lot. In fact, we do that all the time. When you are the most poorest and the most dispossessed, you turn on your own. And they were fighting and really kicking up a stink. And all of a sudden the doors flew open. And this mob that come from the middle, they all know about them. And they've got their cuts across the chest. They carry their spears with them. They walked in and they looked around at everyone and said, you people are shaming yourselves. You are disgusting. You're fighting. You're doing all the wrong things. And what they said to them was, if you don't improve your behavior, we'll take away all your totems and we'll cut off your links to the land. And then they walked out. Nobody said a word while they spoke. And I don't know if it worked or not, but knowing what we know about the way original people fight each other, it probably didn't. But yes, there are a few around. Kano was one that could do magic.
Yeah, and he could do it anywhere, to the point where we were down on, at that point in time, he lived in an island which is called Kangaroo Island, its proper name being Carter. And we finally got there after much driving and trying to make our dinner, whatever, and he just appeared out of nowhere, traditional garb, started talking in traditional language.
But you left one thing out, Evan.
Right.
Who was there with us? Graham Hancock.
Yep.
And Santha were with us. Oh, yeah. They were there too. What had happened was Graham came to Australia and contacted us and said, would you take me out to the country and show us all the stuff you've got? I said, I'd do that, but if you're going to see sacred stuff, you will have to do ceremony. He said, I'm up for that. So what we done is we took him out everywhere, didn't we? We took the Gympie Pyramid, the hieroglyphs at Carrion, all that sort of stuff. And at the end of this, now we've got to travel 3,000 k's by plane and go and do ceremony with Kano. So what Evan's talking about is he did that. And what happened was that after that night, Kano turned up dressed up Olway, didn't he?
Yes.
Paints, the whole business. And then he went down to the fire pit, did a song, spoken language, spoken English, spoken language, spoken English. Then he walked back one step. There were about 12 people there, and we've got them all writing a book about this. Then he walked back the second step and completely disappeared. I looked at Graham, and for the first time I've met Graham, he couldn't speak. And that's unusual for Graham Hancock because he's very good at getting across a message. And Santha was stunned too because that's his wife. And people came up to me and said to me, because what happened was he disappeared completely, and then about a minute later, he reappeared standing behind his wife with this huge smile on his face. And they come running up and said, go and ask him how he did that.
Yeah, we want to know. I want to do it. I want to do it. Yeah.
And I said to him, no, mate, I'm not asking that. I'm not going near him because I won't get an answer.
You'll just get more questions.
But the next day he told someone what he did. And he said that, and he called it something, Wirichin called it too, didn't he? A party trick, he called it. He said, that party trick? He said, that's simple. He said, see that portal over there? And of course the guy looked around and said, no. He said, that's the difference. He said, I can see the portal and you can't. He said, what I did, every human on this planet can do. The problem is you don't know you can do it, and I know I can. And he said that was the answer. Now, I've been with that guy so many times. I watched him do. In fact, I remember I was asked to write a chapter of about 10,000 words on magic and miracles that he did. And I left one off. There were so many of them. And I was talking to his wife, and we were talking about the time he took Wirichin down to an ant's nest. And the day before he took an eagle down there, and within a half an hour, they cleaned it up completely. It was dead, right? It had been hit by a car. It was cleaned up completely, just the bones. He took Wirichin down the next day. He took his clapsticks down and said, I want you to stand on the nest, the ant's nest. What? He said, no, you stand on there and I will sing to the ants. So he got his clapstick out and he started singing to the ants. And Wirichin stood on this mound for the next hour. And at one stage, Kano asked him to sit on top of the mound, which he did. And during that hour, not one ant bit him. He sang the song of the ants. He did that completely. Now, that led me up to the story that I'd forgotten, because when Christine told me that, I thought, oh, my God, I forgot about the time that he sang to the kangaroo.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, this is what happened, because this is what took place. We did ceremony. We went out on a country, didn't we?
Yeah, we'd be given coordinates to look for an ancient civilization. And there were points on a map using special technology.
Can't say too much. Klaus Duna gave us that information.
Yeah, Klaus Duna gave us that information. So we decided, we'll go check out this one. This one looks like it's not too far off a track.
Yeah.
Because some of them are ridiculously hard to get to. You're going through bush that's like, yeah.
Yeah.
But we had a problem, didn't we, Evan? Because this time Arnie Bev who's at the elder for there that we always go on country with, was sick and couldn't give us ceremony.
Mhm.
And it was a smoking ceremony, which I've been doing all the time, but we couldn't do it. So what I did was I went ahead to begin with, and I sent Evan in first. And what I did was I did a rock ceremony I'd been given. And Evan went in first, and he picked up an owl's feather, didn't you?
Yeah, I'll just get it.
He picked up an owl's feather. Now you would, and
Okay.
it flew out as Evan came in. Now you would think that was a good sign, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
No, here it is. Here's the owl's feather.
Okay.
Picked it up. And anyway, we filmed the site, and there were orbs flying around there. We filmed an orb go like this, go round a person's head, round the other side, and fly off. And I thought, whoa, hang on for a sec. That's not a piece of dust, ladies and gentlemen. That's a conscious entity that's moving around someone. And we went back that night to Gosford, and we were saying, great film. We've had a good day there. Evan's got the owl's feather. We're all going well. And then all of a sudden, we get a phone call from Kano. Now, Evan had canned me to the phone, mobile phone. He said, it's Kano. That's bad news, Dan. Because when your elder wants to talk to you, someone else will ring you up and say, your elder wants to talk to you, now ring him.
You've got to.
They don't ring you, you ring them. But this time he rang me, and I knew it was bad news. I got into trouble once before when he rang me, and I thought, oh my God, what have
Here
I
we
done
go
wrong?
again.
And so I take the phone off Evan. I said, Kano, what have I done wrong? He said, you got that right. I think, hang on. I said, Kano, we've been on country today, 3,000 Ks away. I didn't need to ask permission for you this time round. He said, yes, I know that. But he said, when you stacked the rocks one after the other and then thanked them, then brought all the others in, one after the other, and they all did the same ceremony. And he said, then you were filming orbs flying all over you. And then he went through and told us everything we did. And he asked me, why are you wearing a red T-shirt? Remember that? Because we had a helicopter chasing us for about an hour, didn't it?
Yeah.
Chasing us in the bush. That happens a lot. That's a different story. He
Yeah.
said, why do you wear a red T-shirt in the bush? And he went on and told me all this stuff. And then he stopped and said, now I've got to tell you something. He said, number one, Evan went in first. The owl left and he picked up a feather. He said, yes. Does he think that's a good thing? He said, yes. He said, no, it isn't. He'll be punished. Evan, tell him how long you were sick for.
A couple of years.
A couple of years he was sick
What?
continually. Oh, yeah, there's more. That's it. He got away with it easy. Then he said, for you. He said, you are supposed to. When I gave you ceremony, what was it? I said, smoking. He said, what have you done ever since smoking? He said, why didn't you smoke? Oh, because I said, don't tell me about Arnie Bev being sick. We know about that. And so he rattled off and told me that, and he said this. He said, if you ever go onto country again and you don't start by smoking yourself, the spirits have told me they will kill you dead. You won't leave.
Wow.
And I said, all right, okay. And then I decided, bugger it, I'm going to do it this time. I said, Kano, before you hang up, I'm going to ask you a question. Please don't ask another question I can't answer. Please give me an answer for once. You are 3,000 Ks away. We did this 4 hours ago. That is 750 kilometers per hour. You know everything we've done. And I want to know one thing. And it's the obvious one, Dan. How do you know? He said, that's simple. He said, I've got a red kangaroo, which is a 6-foot kangaroo sitting on my veranda right now next to me. And he has told me everything you've done. Now think about that. 750, it's 3,000 Ks away. 4 hours ago this happened. And he rattled off everything I did, including to the shape that the rocks made, what I said, what I wore, what he did. He knew all of it. And Christine told me, and this is how it all came together. She said every morning Kano would go out to the kangaroos and talk to them. And they would talk back. And sometimes he would laugh. And sometimes he'd roll on the ground with them. And they'd roll on the ground with him. And when he was finished, he'd just leave them and they'd follow him. He could talk to animals. Eagles, I got stories about eagles. I could do that for hours on end. That is the sort of person that led us on the country and gave us the right. And when he gave me that ceremony, that gave me the right to walk onto country anywhere in Australia and use his name. So, yes, that isn't what an elder is. I wanted to give you a better indication, understanding what they do.
You are opening up a whole new world for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. This is something like right out of a 60s television show. They don't even show this stuff anymore. And
Yeah.
this kind
For a
of
while, I used to get shocked, mate. For a while, I used to get shocked by this, but this happened to me on about at least 8, 9 occasions. And even when I was writing a book about this, I forgot some of them. I couldn't remember them. There were so many of them that took place that he did. And everyone knew about it. I remember once I was driving a bus on Kangaroo Island, and I'm driving the bus, and all the elders in the back, and Kano's sitting alongside me, and all of a sudden he picks up his clapsticks and starts singing. And then I look to the side of me while I'm driving, and there's a wedge-tailed eagle about 2 meters away from me, flying alongside the bus on my side, watching me. And next to Kano on the other side is the other wedge-tailed eagle. And while he sang, as we're driving on that bus doing about 35, 40 Ks an hour, the eagles were keeping up, so they were identical alongside. And I've got to tell you, Dan, it's very hard to drive a bus with all these people inside when you look to the side and there's a wedge-tailed eagle checking you out, and you think, that's not normal. But this is just normal, a normal day in the life of Kano. When I first met him the first time, he had a dingo that followed him everywhere. And it followed him and dingoes are quite rare and they're never domesticated. But in Kano's case, he didn't domesticate it, he just sung it. And it came to him and followed him for years ever since, and followed him like it was his brother. So that's, when you say it's out of the 60s, I want to make the point that when we talk about all this sort of stuff, whether it's ghosts or all this stuff, it's all related. And it's not out of the 60s, it's our history. This is what Kano tried to tell me. He said, they've stolen your history off you. They've taken away the mysticism. They've taken away the miracles, and they've given you what in return? Money, computers, and bright lights. He said, walk away from it. It's not the real life. It's not what we're here for. So, yeah, that's what Now, I've got to make the point. The number of elders like Kano now are rare. But there was a time in the past when elders like Kano, whether it was in America, whether it was in England with the Druids, they were everywhere. We lived that way until about 2,000 years ago, and now we've lost it. Kano's job was to try and bring that back, and that's why he was around.
Okay. Does the same kind of stories comes from our American Indians, but you don't hear them anymore. Do you think there's still people here that can do that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, there was a photo that was circulating through social media, and it was the first American elder, and this eagle came into the football. I think it was football.
Oh, yeah.
And then he was the only first American person in the whole field that landed on his arm.
He sat there, 10,000 people there just sitting there like that on his arm.
I'll just watch the game while there's an eagle sitting on my arm. But I don't know when that photo was taken, but it's probably sometime in the last
quite
couple
recent.
of years. Yeah.
No, they're still around, Dan, but the problem is that the elders like that have learnt when they started talking like that, whether it's the whites that came to Australia or the whites that came to America, they would talk like that to begin with. And you can imagine the reaction they got from the people they spoke to. Well, after a while, they realised, well, we don't talk about this anymore. So when you get to this stage, yes, they're still around, and I have absolutely no doubt. In fact, I know this is the case. You have people like that in your country. We have them in our country. They're not many, but they keep this sort of information quiet and secret. You will learn that information when you get your ceremony. I mean, we went with another elder, Bob Crombie, and he took us to the portal, the one that Kano was playing with up his way in South Australia. There's a portal that appears near Sydney the same time every year, doesn't it? For one night.
It's something to do with the moon and the light, but it's only certain times of the year. So we just thought we're going on a small walk. He didn't really, and that's part of the process. He said, yeah, I'm just going to show you a quick site. Won't take that long. And it's night, so we're thinking, oh, well, it won't be, maybe it's on a path or something. Oh, no. We went to this national park, And then he pointed at this silhouette of a distant mountain and went, "That's where I'll be. I'll see you there. But you can't help each other. Spread out and walk in that direction." And then the last thing he said was, there are funnel webs, so you might want to go put your hands up first.
Because you'll walk into them.
Then disappeared, and then we're like, great.
Then another when he did the other one, we said when it's pitch black, you have to run 300 meters through the bush and run as fast as you can. And I said, "What if you fall?" He said, "Well, then you'll fall down." I said, "I don't want to do this." He said, "Here's the trick." He said, "If you don't do it, you don't get to do the ceremony."
But one of the main parts of the ceremony was, I think there was about 8 of us. So what would happen was you get each person to walk to the end of this rock platform.
Mm-hmm.
So you would say, in my case, all right, it's my turn. So I walked to the end of the platform, turned around, I could see everyone, fine. But what everyone else saw was me walk to the end of the platform and then disappear. And we're still carrying on a conversation, but I am now gone from sight. And Steve did it as well, as did the 7 other people. But then what would happen was you would then he'd call you back over. You'd then step one step towards everyone else, and then you'd reappear. But everyone reappeared about a foot taller than their actual height. And then you take one more step, and then you shrink down to normal size.
And then you're back.
Then you're back. Now, at the very end, someone walked to the end. We could see them, and we went, "Why can we see this one person?" And we figured it was this guy. I forget his name. And said, "Well, why can we see you?" And then he's behind me. That's not me. I'm here. I don't know who that is. We didn't know who that was. That was someone.
Wow.
What do you say? A ghost or spirit or someone else?
It was a spirit.
Yeah. So
because we thought it was his go, but he already had his go.
No, I had my go 4 people ago. That's not me.
We're looking at this thing that's walking into this portal again, and it's not us. It was the spirit that would have been part of this. So, like this stuff you're doing is common. We all know that's true.
Okay.
And what the elders have told us is how to contact those beings and how to be in contact with them. So what we have in our country is we have people that still have the knowledge of what we used to be. What we used to be. And I've got to make the point, ladies and gentlemen, that what we used to be and what we are today, we are a pale reflection. I've been with elders that can basically, they are what we would call today miracles. But when I say that to them, they shake their head and say, "No, any human on the planet can do what I can do. It's just that you have forgotten and we didn't." It's all about that. So we still have that potential. Yeah, and I want to make the point, the reason why aliens have come to this planet, people shouldn't be discussing if they're here. That's a waste of time. The real question is, why are they here?
Okay.
That's the one that people need to understand. And I'm going to tell you part of the reason is they came for people like Kano to learn off them, ladies and gentlemen. Believe it or not, we've been told time after time there is something about humans that all ETs, extraterrestrials and off-the-world beings admire and want to understand. And we keep looking at ourselves and we don't understand what we had. What we once had and what those elders are doing, whether they're in Australia, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in America, they're still around. And what they're trying to do desperately is to remind people of what we have sacrificed and the poor rewards for that and what we could get back.
Mm-hmm. Guys, you're opening up whole new worlds for people. This is incredible. Listen, let me take a quick break. And then when we come back, I want to hit the alien origin story and find out what you think on that point. So would you hold on just a minute? We'll be right back.
It's almost here, ladies and gentlemen. The UNX Network Year 2 anniversary at XCon 2023. XCon is being held this year from October the 30th to November 1st at the beautiful Oasis Hotel and Conference Center in Springfield, Missouri. Top speakers include host of America Unearthed, Scott Walter, plus Haley Ramsey, Sev Tok, UNX's very own Maureen Richmond and Dan Terry, Mindy Toutfest, Harriet McFeely, Forrest Crawford, and many more. and they're all coming to deliver new information on topics like UFOs, alien encounters, cryptids and ancient secrets, and real hauntings from the afterlife. Join us for the film premiere of A Haunting in Blue Hill. And don't miss the Mad Hatter Paranormal Halloween Bash, Banquet, and Costume Contest on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. So join us as we close out the 2023 conference season. Info and tickets are available now at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com, and we'll see you there.
All right, friends. I don't know what I can say these guys haven't covered. There's been so much information here. So let's just get right back to them and find out some more about the alien origin.
Right. What we're going to do now is, because we are basically scientists first, and that's why we've got so many problems with the Australian government. I want to take you to a site where we found 4 skulls. I have looked at a person who works with Chris Stringer, who's considered the top archaeologist in the world. One of his apprentices has looked at this skull and said exactly what I'm going to tell you now. Now, what I'd like to do, if it's possible, is I'd like to show you a couple of pictures from a site I worked on, if that's okay, mate. And I can put, Evan's going to put that up for you to show you. And here is a picture of what we started working on. Hopefully it's coming up, is it, Evan?
Yeah. Yep. There we go.
Right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there are 4 of these beings I am aware of. I'm actually going to show you one when I finish with this. I was called onto this site. A farmer found this being along with another one, which I'll show you in a second, and contacted the government, as a farmer should, to tell the government, I've found a skull that doesn't look normal. If you're looking at it right now, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you, you don't have eyes like that, and you have a forehead. It doesn't have one, but you'll see more of it in a sec. And the farmer was told, oh, we'll come and have a look at it. And they did. And they had a look at it, and they picked the skulls up, and they threw them everywhere. I know that because I know originally this skull was buried with the whole body there, the whole body together. The arms and the knees were up against the chest. It was facing the east. Anyway, I got down there and I saw this skull, and what Evan's going to do is show you 4 pictures now of the skull that I found, and there was one alongside that was a lot different. The first thing you'll see is look at the nose shape, look at the eye shape, and then look at yourself, and guess what? It ain't the same. Number 2, please, Evan. We'll just go through the ones we've got. There is a different picture of the same thing, but it's got a massive skull. But ladies and gentlemen, it's not up. It goes backwards. It slopes back at 190 degrees from the forehead and runs back and goes down. You're going to see it in a sec because we've reconstructed one. Next one, please, Evan. And alongside it was another being, completely different. Look at the nose, the way it sticks out on that first thing. It starts up above your eyes. Look at the eyebrow ridge. Yours is depressed. This sticks out. And alongside it, and by the way, that skull has a thickness of around about 3 mils. The one alongside has a thickness of 15 mils, and they were buried next to one another. So next one, please, Evan. I think that's all we've got of that one. Yeah, don't worry about it. Go from there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if we can come back, what that meant straight away, when I looked at that being, there were quite a few things that didn't make sense to me. But the most amazing part of this being, I haven't got a picture of it, oh, we do have one, was the humerus bone. Not the skull, but the humerus bone. And I'll explain why. A humerus bone is the bone that goes from the top of your shoulder to your elbow. And when you bang it and it hurts, you say, I've hit my funny bone. It comes from the word humerus. That's how that came about, but it ain't funny. So what happens is I picked it up, the humerus bone, and it ran to there, from the top, past my elbow, down towards my wrist. But I didn't have an elbow joint. And I measured it, and it was 44 centimeters. My humerus bone and yours is between 29 to 31. A gibbon is 35. Well, this was no less than 46 and could have been 50. And I figured out these arms would be dragging on the ground, literally. So I've got this being with massive eyes, strange nose, no forehead, and it's got an arm. Now, the femur bone was exactly the same as mine. And I figured this is a 5'10" animal. When we measured this one, I did some calculations, and it meant that it was 8'10". And I'm thinking, hang on for a sec, I've got a leg that's 5'10" and an arm that's 8'10". But the bizarre part of that arm was it ran down there, but it wasn't thicker than 1 inch. A gibbon is 2 inches because it's its main limb. So we had a problem, ladies and gentlemen, because what I looked at now is an arm that is so long and so thin, it wouldn't work. And I've got eyes that are so massive, if they went out in the daytime, they'd be blinded. I thought to myself, well, then it can't be born here unless it's a mutation, because the arms don't work, the eyes don't work. This is not from this place. Now, if the gravity was half of what it is here, the arm would work. If the sunlight was less than what was here, the eyes would work. But as it stands, and by the way, the Cherokee call these people what, Evan?
The moon people.
The moon people. And when the Cherokee first came to their land, they said the moon people were already here, but they'd only come out at night and they would farm the land. And when the moon people finally left the Cherokee, and this comes from the Cherokee, Dr. Artie Skiller Clark, he said it was the greatest sadness the Cherokee ever experienced because they begged them to stay. They were working together. So these are these people. What then happened was we started this process, and as soon as we put the first paper out, the government wanted to put me in jail, didn't they, Evan?
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
Straight away, we're getting formal letters where you've got to write 43 responses. I'm getting phone calls on a daily basis explaining how I'm going to get 6 months to 3 years in jail, $250,000 to $750,000 fine. How do I know that? Because I have a box of book letters, don't I? Registered mail. I was getting it on a daily basis, and they were going to put me in jail. So this went on at the same time. Then what happened was an academic from Victoria contacted us and said, come and meet me. I've got one of these too. Oh, we better come down and have a look. And we did. And as I'm driving down in the car, were you with me then, Evan?
I was.
Yeah. I get a phone call from Wirrachin, who is from the tribe I work with. And he says to me, you're going to pick up a skull today, aren't you? I said, well, yeah, Wirrachin, but I didn't tell you about that. Oh, don't worry about it. The spirits told me. They've got 2 messages to send to you right now, and I'm ringing you to tell you what those messages are. Number 1, what is going to happen is when you get there, you're going to find this particular skull comes from the Wimmera region, which is a region in Australia that would make up about 0.00002% of the landmass. It's a tiny little area. And he told me the second part was that this particular skull is the skull of Byami. Now, Byami is the chief. Now, I've got to make the point here.
Okay.
Dan, original people do not call them spirits or gods. They call them sky heroes. Original people knew exactly what they were, mate. They weren't going to give you something that gave you an idea it could be an angel. No, they're sky heroes. And he said, this is the son of Byami. Now, Byami is, according to the original people, the first alien that ever came here.
Okay.
Well, how am I going to prove that? I said, mate, you've left yourself in a corner here because by saying it comes from the Wimmera region, it's such a small area. So we get out of the car and the professor walks out of his house and he has the skull There's a picture of it there. There's a section of it. Evan's just shown us. He's got the skull in his hand. He said, this comes from the Wimmera region. And I stopped and thought to myself, I think we've got something here. So we took those 8 pieces of skull back, didn't we, Evan?
Mhm.
And then we got in contact with the guy that used to do skulls for the Australian Museum, who had put him in jail for 5 years, but we won't go down that story, will we? Oh, no. It was set up. Don't worry. It was set up. And he wanted to work on this. And I'm going to hold it up to you now and show you what he created.
Okay.
Here's part 1. And I'm going to hold that up now. That is the being. There it is front on. There it is side on. Now, I want you to look at the shape of that skull and compare it to yours. And you know what? There is no hominid on this planet that has a skull shape like this. Most of the brain, in fact, about 85 to 90% of your brain is above your eye line.
Okay.
You know how much this is above the eye line? Nothing. Completely different.
So
Now-
it's just different to the cone head ones.
No,
Just pointing
not
in
like the
opposite
cone heads.
direction.
This is different. This is way different. And by the way, we know of 4 of these that are spread over 2,000 kilometers in 4 different tribal areas, 1 in the desert, 2 near a river, and 1 on the coast. It can't be a mutation. Impossible. So that's how it looks to begin with. Then what he did was he went to someone else. And that person works in Australia for Hollywood. And he is the person who creates, what are the films he did?
Alien and Predator.
All those animals, those beings there, he does it. And then he took it over and he did the second part. And here is the complete skull.
All
That's
right.
what it looks like. Now, what I'm going to do now, just for the people who haven't seen this before, I'm going to hold next to it a normal skull. And you get to see the two. Right? You get to see the difference between the 2 of them. Notice the shape of the nose, notice the eyes, notice the eyebrow ridge, and what do they have in common? Now, the most important part about this being is have a look at the back of it. Look at that. Now, from there to there is 17 centimeters, Dan. Okay? Now, when a lady is giving a baby, they say dilate to what? 10. I'm going to let you in on a secret. Ain't going to work. 12. Still won't work. Now, the problem with this is, can you see the sutures running on the back of this skull? There aren't any. That means it can't be a sapien and it can't be a hominin. That is the rule. All sapiens and hominins have sutures, 3 of them. And as you know, Dan, when we're born, they're not even fused, are they?
Right.
And that is why hominids can grow their brains, because our skull isn't fused. But monkeys, apes, gorillas, they don't have sutures. Their brains stay the same, but we're supposed to come from them. Oh, we'll leave that alone for now. Just a small problem.
Oops.
But this is the important part, man. You put that face with the other face I showed you, and you know what you get? When you get zebras, they all look the same. When you get elephants, they all look the same. When you get any animal, unless it's been crossed with its genetics, they all have roughly the same height, the same weight, the same speed of movement, the same everything. Gorillas and orangutans and chimps, supposedly our closest enemies, they all look the same. But when it comes to humans, we all look different. There's 7 billion people on this planet, no 2 are the same. How can that be? Easy. There's Dad. You put Dad together with Mum, and you put those eyes together, you put that face together, you can make anything. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, when you get a herd of zebras, they all run the same speed. You put a herd of humans together, man, and they can do 2 Ks an hour and 35 Ks an hour. Everything about humans is different. We have different fingerprints, different retinal patterns, and even our heartbeats are all different to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are the only animals on this planet that are diverse. All other animals are within general frameworks of height, weight, movement. We are different in every way because, ladies and gentlemen, we are a combination of on-world beings and off-world beings. And that is the story of this. The original people have one dreaming story that goes through the whole of Australia. Every other dreaming story is tribal and region specific. But the story of the 7 sisters of the Pleiades is known by the Hopi. It is known by the Cherokee. It is known by the Greeks. And it's known by the original people. And we believe the 7 sisters came to this planet. And notice they weren't brothers. Who makes babies? Brothers don't make babies. Sisters do. They came here to become part of us. All of my elders, when we were going out on country, I had one elder, Uncle Jerry, that would talk to me a lot. And he always finished his conversation by saying exactly the same thing each time. And this meant he was finished. He would say this: my grandmother told me the Pleiadians are my brothers, my sisters, my mothers, and my fathers. And then he closed up. Now, the original people of Australia have one dreaming story that spreads the whole continent. And that's the 7 sisters of the Pleiades, because they are us and we are them. So that is what part of our work is about. We find information like this. And what I want to do now in the time we've got, and I know I'd like to do it, show you a little bit more science.
Sure.
And I want to show you 3 objects, and I'll hold them up one by one. And here is the first one. This is a piece of metal. And can you see on the top there, there's a little bit of a clasp that normally joined up. This was found at the Carrion Glyphs, which is an area where there's 310 hieroglyphs that look decidedly Egyptian. This particular object, along with this thing, were picked up by an elder called Ani Minnie Mace. And when she picked this up, it was a clump of dirt. And she was told to take it home by the spirits that were at that site and clean it. And when she did, this is what turned up. Now, what happened was, I know a person that runs a laboratory at Southern Cross University. It's a laboratory that has 300 scientists that work there full time, which makes it the only laboratory in Australia where scientists make money. And the head scientist saw this piece of metal and said, there's something wrong with this. He said, could I analyze it? I said, oh, I'd have to ask Auntie Minnie Mace, wouldn't I? And she agreed to it. And if I hold it up to now, you'll see a little bit of a cut just there. That's where they cut it. Now, it's aluminium, basically. And he knew that, but there was something about the aluminium he looked at and says, wrong. This is wrong. I've never seen this before. And when we got the analysis back, we found out what was wrong with it. It was 73% aluminium, 3% copper, and 24% not on the earthly periodic table. This piece of aluminium, they used every drill they had and had to use a diamond tip drill to cut that piece of metal off. They couldn't get it off. And he told me, he said, this aluminium is stronger than stainless steel, hardened steel. It's one of the strongest elements I've ever seen, but it's aluminium. He said, you could make billions of dollars out of this, because aluminium, as you need, put a soft drink can, you can crush it like that. You couldn't with this. You couldn't do it. Of course, the reason I can't do it is the 24% doesn't come from here. It comes from off-world. And now I'm going to show you another one. This one here, a ring, a rather large ring, not made for my finger or a sapien finger, I can tell you that now. See the 2 things on the top there? We've had this analysed, not by the laboratory, this time because I didn't want to cut. It was done by only 1 or 2 of these machines in Australia. It does it electronically. And what they did was analyse what this was. And this is where it gets interesting. It had rhodium, palladium, ruthenium, cadmium, gallium. Now, what's interesting about them is one of them is particularly interesting, which is the one gallium. Gallium is actually a byproduct that was discovered in the late 1800s. And you've got to melt aluminium steel at 4,000 degrees to get gallium, right? And then it's a byproduct, and you might get 0.1. The gallium in this one is 6.89%. And by the way, this came from Angkor Wat. It's been broken 3 times, and it's thousands of years old. But all of those IUMs I mentioned, and I think,
here we go.
Evan's going to put up the metal readout for you.
Okay.
It's platinum, palladium, rhodium, ruthenium, cadmium, and gallium. But here's the interesting part. When you look at the readout there, it adds up to 58.2%. 41.8% is not in there. It's another one of these things that turns up that has a metal in here that is not in the earthly periodic table. Now, what you're starting to find is I showed you aliens, the actual skulls of the aliens. Now I'm showing you some of the stuff they left behind. This particular piece of metal here, this got me another letter from the Australian government. I've been very popular with them. They love writing to me. And this one, they don't want this to get out too, because this chemical readout is ridiculous. There is nothing on the planet that has 6.89% gallium.
And weirdly enough, inside is a cable.
Yeah, this has been broken 3 times. This is called the ring that Evan broke, my wife Jill broke,
Accident.
and David broke, because the lady who bought this ring, her husband picked this up and just put it on the table and it broke. This is so fragile. It's been stuck together 3 times with super glue and is kept there. This is at least 10,000 years old, but it has technology that we don't have today, and it has technology we've only just come up with. Some of these rings we've got have got titanium in them. We got a ring from Atlantis that has from Lemuria that has titanium. This particular ring I'm holding up now also comes from Angkor Wat. Now, this is made of orichalcum. Orichalcum is the mythical metal, according to Wikipedia, that came from the mythical continent of Atlantis. We have rings that just solely have orichalcum in them. This is all alien stuff, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know about gallium. We only just discovered the damn thing. And I don't believe there was ever in Angkor Wat an oven at 4,000 degrees that could melt the damn thing. And then why then melt it and put it in? Mm-hmm. Mind you, Mesrith told us about this ring, didn't he?
Yeah.
Our alien contact, and said this is a communicator with them. And it makes sense, because what's on the top? You've got these 2 sources on the top. You've got this massive thick ring that goes for fingers that aren't mine. And they're not yours either, Dan. We've got to have someone that's about 12, 13 foot high before this gets fit on. And the same, by the way, with this ring that also comes from Angkor Wat. Look where my finger is. These rings were not made for us. They were made for giants. But that's a different story, because we could go down that path too. So what you're seeing there is concrete, hard evidence, not a picture of a thing that's flying up in the sky that someone says, oh, it's the Chinese. Yeah, right. Roswell, 1947, the Chinese were making UFOs. No, they were fighting with pitchforks and trying to get a country back in order. No, that's not true. It was not the Chinese. And I know the Pentagon said it could have been the Chinese or the Russians. If it was the Russians, Cuban Missile Crisis, early 1960s, they would have wiped out America then. Rubbish. It's neither. Yeah. These things prove what it is. This has metal that's not from here. This has metal that's not from here. We are seeing evidence in Australia that the elders have sat on, mate. They sat on it because they didn't trust anyone. We did the ceremony. So when we walk into those places, remember, original people were supposed to have a stick, stone, and bone technology, right? Yeah. So look at this piece of rock I'm going to hold up now. See that? That rock has been marked like that, and it's got a very sharp blade on the top that I broke. Here's another rock that's original. How do you make this rock with another rock and bang it into shape? Doesn't make sense. This rock I'm going to hold up, the Smithsonian have contacted us about. And as you know, Dan, the Smithsonian are a very respected scientific organisation whose job is to hide things. And they've written to us twice to say this particular rock I'm holding up now, and I'll turn it around, is unique and like nothing else in the world. It comes from Australia. But we're only stick, stone, bone technology. How did we cut these lines that run across there? Here's another one I'm going to hold up. I'm just showing you a few now. This particular one I'm holding up now. That has got 7 stars on it. This is the 7 stars on this side, rather, of the Pleiades. Here's another rock that's found from around here, and I'll hold this one up now. And it's got motifs that have been put on top of it and stuck on top of the rock. And it's basically a triangular rocks on both sides, and you hold it. Now, we have literally hundreds of rocks like these that have been given to us. We've never bought or picked up a rock on country. People give them to us, elders give them to us, and we're putting them onto country with Ramangeri country and putting them on display, and people will sit inside them and meditate with them. So what I've shown you in the small period of time we've had, I've shown you a skull that is not ours. Now remember, these beings do not have sutures. Well, they can't be us. And I can tell you now, there is no woman on this planet that can give birth to a non-sutured 17-centimeter skull and live. I've done a couple of talks with this, and I've held up the skull and said, hand up the women who would like to give natural birth. Not a hand goes up, mate. Hand up those for cesarean. There you go. I'm not touching this. I'm proving to people, and that's why the government have been so... Oh, by the way, I can tell you, the government wrote to us about a year ago, didn't they, Evan? Yeah. They sent us an official warning letter. And what they said was this: we have more than enough evidence to take you to court and put you in jail. And I know I've got what's called an ASIO agent. You would know them as the CIA. And their job is to put me in jail, and there I will be killed. Right? That's the rule. And they wrote to me and said, we've got enough to do this, but at this particular stage, we've decided not to take you to court. And then the next paragraph, it says, but, I love it when you say but. It's like, I'm not racist, but at any stage in the future, we reserve the right to take you back to court. So what they're trying to say is basically, shut up. Don't say anything else, and we'll leave you alone. And of course, that was an incentive to keep talking. And that's what we're doing now.
All right. Stephen, I've got to go.
Yes, no.
Boy, we are running. But can I get you guys to come back one day soon? Because we haven't even hit the woman you talked about with the alien information and all of that. You guys have just so much more to talk about.
You've got
I'd
a
like
lot
to get
more.
you back here.
Yeah, love to.
Love that.
All right. Well, you watch your back, because it sounds like somebody's out to get you guys. And
Don't worry about that.
we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Thank you so much, Terry.
Thanks,
Dan.
again, Ellis.
We really
you
appreciate
coming
it.
in. Talk to you soon. Wow. Well, guys, I don't have much more I can say here, except we've got the XCon coming up October 30th to November 1st. Check unxnetwork.com. Become a member. It's free. First page, go down a little bit, put your contact info, and you will have a chance for quite a substantial savings if you want to come to the XCon. And for right now, these guys have got me kind of really wild. So I'm going to go ahead and go, but I want you guys to remember to stay spooked. Good night.